Hello, welcome to the second video, the second session on the metrics training course for WIFM dashboards, how to manage your community fire hose. We're going to be looking at the spreadsheet, and we've already set it up in the first section. Now, instead of setting it up, I'd like to talk about actually filling it out. And then after this, we're going to move into our next two sessions, which is going to be all about that what's in it for me dashboard system that I did promise you at the beginning of all of this. So let's get started. All right, so last time we covered the introduction, which again explains virtually everything that you really need to know. But then we also set up our terms, which includes putting together our community scope, our stage, defining who, what, and where this community is. And then for our category all the way through to tag system, we've set up an infrastructure that will allow us to count iteratively all of the information that's coming into our community on a daily basis. For now, it's manual. I want to be clear about this. For now, it's manual. You can automate later, but what's most important for you to understand is how your data is abstracting. Because remember, this is a social scientific process. This is inductive rather than deductive. There's not a lot of data for you to pull, so that data collection is twice as important. So with that said, let's go into how you should actually collect this data. You'll see here that we actually have a CM field journal. I would like to go ahead and start here because it's where any social scientist in their own right starts. And all this is exactly what it sounds like. It is a journal that you are going to take about the observations that you had in your community. You'll see here, I started my day working on the common room training video for the team, and I discovered some tags weren't implementing properly. And you're like, uh-oh, let's go ahead and mark that as a negative disposition. And we're actually going to call it a category of uh-oh and then attention of org versus community. So this is one of those things where it's like, it's pulling at your hours. You have to decide, am I going to do this thing that's more important for the organization that I work for or for the community that I have? Now, these categories and tags are directly filled in under the setup terms area. So you'll see category, subcategory, topic, and tag. When you fill this in, it will then show up underneath the drop-down box for your setup. This one, you can only select a single topic. This one, under tags, you can have as many as you like. So you'll see we just selected support deflection. And what this does is it allows you to include multiple tags in a single category. Now, what's important about this is as you start to build this out and you start to tag it, you are deciding what tags and what categories you need for your own data. What's happening is you're saying, I just noticed this in my online community and it seems a little bit weird, so I'm going to note it down. And then over time, it starts to come up over and over and over again. So you start to say, oh, I'm starting to recognize a pattern here. Let's see if it trends over the course of the next long while. So you set it up by saying this is going to be a tag that I want to click into, and there's going to be a category that this tag falls into. And you go over to your codex and then you type it in and you say, this is an interaction opportunity. Here's what I mean when I say it's an interaction opportunity. Here's the first comment that I wanted to tag it onto, and here's when you should and should not use it. Once you've set this up and you've applied your tag and category, now underneath your field journal, you'll see that all of these tags have converted to our second page. Our second page takes that field journal concept and flips it around. Now, instead of reporting on your community, you are pulling in the community data and you're using the tags that your journal thinks are important in order to tag the qualitative data within your online community. Now there's a lot more structure because as comments are coming in, you're not just saying, oh, I think this means this, or, oh, I think this means this. You can only choose the tags that you have already deemed important within your field journal. That means that there's going to be this conversation happening now, wherein your community will start to have a thing and you'll start to be like, oh, there's this thing that's coming out of all of this data that I never noticed in my field journal. Let me note that down when I'm tagging in my journal so that I can kind of observe it and figure out if it's going to exist. And if by next week it ends up in your journal becoming a trend, then it goes into the system, you start cataloging and tagging it, and then you start tracking it over time. One of the critical things about this as well is that this system, even though it's a spreadsheet, and keep in mind, you'll get more advanced, you'll move into more advanced platforms, this is keeping a historical record of the things that you think matter to your community based off of what's coming in from your community. Because your tags and your category systems have a hierarchical setup that allows you to very easily sort through them, you are now taking the giant fire hose that's coming into your brain and you are sorting all of that fire hose of water into individual buckets that talk about specific things that you think are highly relevant to your work. What this does as you start to track your sentiment and you start to build your field journal is it gives you a lexicon or a codex for you to start talking about your community. But there's also another part to this story. You'll notice that we have one last tab to cover and we haven't ever actually touched it. This tab is the behavior tracking map. What this does is it looks at the other side of data. This journal and sentiment data is just giving you the sentiment portion of your online community, but you still need to translate that language now. You need to be able to quantify it, to qualify it, to abstract it into the same language that the rest of your team for your brand community is going to be using. i.e., you need to be able to connect the behaviors that your marketing funnel is connecting to the data that you have, or it's not going to jive with what the marketing department is saying. And that's what this spreadsheet is for. You'll note that, again, we have your community scope and we also have your community stage. When you discover that your community is performing a variety of different actions and you want to be able to track that action, you can use the first several columns of this community team spreadsheet, and then you can send that information to the marketing team where they will say, here's how we think we'll make the system track that behavior. And that's important because this spreadsheet gives you all the sentiment, but you need to be able now to track the behavior because that's also one of the most important atomic metrics for you. So all you need to do now is you need to say, what is the user's intended goal for a specific behavior? Let's say that that user's goal is to give a kudos to the events team for putting on a really great event. So you say, hey, thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and send you a survey. And you're going to say the goal is to submit a survey. And the action that the user is going to take is that they click submit on that survey. And the behavior that they're going to provide is that they open the survey and that they submit the survey. And then let's say you give them an extra value. Thank you so much for your feedback. We really appreciate it. Here's a small reward. Once you've filled this out and you've gotten the value awarded, now you can say this is in the scope of the community where I expect this to happen. And this is the stage I would like you, dear marketing team, to consider this a conversion as. And what this does is it allows them to create something called a community generated lead with the information of the scope and the stage in that data. So now the marketing team, just like they're reporting on the behaviors of their own work, can actually track the community's leads the same way they track their own. And now you have two comparable audiences, two comparable scopes. You have leads coming in from the community and leads that are not, and that allows you to compare the two. Your marketing team is going to know how to use this tool way better than you will, but suffice to say, whenever you observe a behavior in your community that you want to track, come to this slide, fill out those 4 columns, tell them the scope and the stage that you think they'll connect, and then ask them to fill in the other half. How are they going to track it? What tools or systems are they going to use to track it? That kind of thing. This is very much so a teamwork kind of situation. So with that said, we're done. That is how to use this system. The prior lesson was all about being able to set up the system. And then now we're talking about collecting the data, figuring out what tags and categories you actually want to flow. And then after all of that, going to the marketing team and saying, hey, it looks like this stuff is happening. We have some trends. We'd love to be able to measure these. So we'll take care of the sentiment. Here's what we think you can track to take care of the behaviors. Now that you have that behavior and sentiment data, you now have all of those footprints in the sand. If you remember, I talked about that. Some people are going to look at the detail of a single footprint. Some people are going to look at the trend and the pattern. And what really matters is that you track the footprints so that people have the data regardless of what they care about. So that said, let's go ahead and move into the next section, which is going to be looking at the actual dashboards, which I'm super, super excited about. I will see you over there.